We do have one person missing today because he's sick, so we'll record, and the recording will go up on the class website so that you can refer back to it at any time if you like. So let's start with introductions. I'm Linda Wastyn, president of Wastyn and Associates. We're about 12 years old now and doing fundraising, consulting, grant development work, strategic planning, leadership, and board development. And been doing fund development for 35 years. And just excited to talk about ways to improve your special events. My background's in communication. So my undergraduate and master's degrees in communication. So that's the perspective I come to this with. And I'll tell you more about that as we kind of get started. So Sarah, you want to go next?
My name is Sarah Cross. I'm the executive director of First Tee of the Quad Cities, which is a large youth golf organization that uses a lot of character development and values that you find naturally embedded in golf. And we teach that in a golf setting, but also how to apply that to your home life and school life. And we have a lot of kids in our program. We're over 900 kids in a golf season right now, 3 locations, which is really great. I think the biggest thing I want to get out of this is just kind of what Linda just said is how do we maximize our current set of events? We don't really have the time or truly the manpower to keep adding all these events and trying things and stuff. So what we have going on is really, really great. But I think if there are ways to exponentially make it better, then that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks for being here. First Tee, great program.
Yeah, good, thanks.
My son went through that.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that.
20-some years ago.
Yeah.
Kathy.
Okay, my name is Kathy Barker. I am the founder and executive director of Barker Farms. We're a mission group that grows food and donates it to those in need. And I've said it before, it's that simple. Nothing too complicated about that. And so the things I like to gain from today is validation that I'm on the right track, that my thinking is going to lead us forward, and obviously pick up any words of wisdom and tidbits and all that good stuff along the way.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Leslie.
Hey everybody, I'm Leslie Klipsch. Is it Sarah? I was just on your website the other day. I was going to sign up my 13-year-old for golf. So that's,
yay,
I feel like
do.
the universe is telling me that is something I need to do.
Yes.
But I'm here. Yeah. I'm here today on behalf of Argos House of Healing and Hope, and we are a social enterprise that's located here in the Quad Cities. So Argos House offers holistic care to women survivors of violence, as well as job training, job opportunities in the enterprise, which is lotions and soaps and bath bombs. If you haven't tried them yet, they're fantastic. I've been a longtime friend of Dr. Kit, who's the executive director, and fan of Argos House. I just in the last month have started a really part-time role just with kind of consulting with her on development and communications, things like that. So she asked me to attend today. We have a gala coming up in September. So I'm really looking forward to learning everything I can today. Like you, Linda, my background is really more communications and marketing. I am an accidental fundraiser. For some reason, I keep stepping into these roles, which is great. I think there's so many wonderful causes and organizations in the Quad Cities, and I'm always really happy to support them by either going to their fundraisers or helping or throwing our own, I guess. I, for 10 years, did a event in downtown Davenport, which we focused on raising money for clean water solutions throughout the globe. But we ended that in 2018. And so I was really happy when Dr. Kit asked me to join this class today, because I feel like the world has changed so much since then. And so really fundraising before the pandemic and now fundraising now in terms of events and everything else is so different. So I'm just really looking forward to kind of getting that cutting edge perspective on event planning and raising money.
Awesome. And your experience attending events too will be very
Mhm.
useful because I'm sure many of you have attended lots of events, the good, the bad, the ugly, and definitely share those perspectives too.
Yeah, I love a good party.
Thanks, Leslie. Marcy.
Yeah, hi. So I'm the executive director of the Rock Island County Children's Advocacy Center. We're an independent not-for-profit. We're not underneath Rock Island County's umbrella. We interview children under the age of 18 for investigations with DCFS and law enforcement for sexual abuse and physical abuse investigations. And then we offer advocacy and counseling. So we're very unique in what we do. Nobody else does it, but we're also very small. There's only 5 of us that work here. And so prior to me, I've been here for 5 years as the executive director. And prior to that, they did not do fundraising here at the center. And so we have slowly started doing fundraising, and I have 2 events that we've done. And because we're small, we can't devote all of our resources to that. And I don't have anybody who that's their full-time job. So what we've done, I'd like to know how we can maximize that with just a small group that we have, so we don't have to keep expanding, because I can't fundraise 24/7 just because of the fact that we're too small for that.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Marcy. Selena.
My name is Selena Ripple, and I'm the development manager at the Humane Society of Scott County. I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm fostering a sick puppy, so he might start crying because he's in his crate right now. So I'll keep myself muted. But we are the open admission animal shelter in Scott County. So that means we're the only organization that takes in all of the stray animals in our area. So we are constantly, again, in the same boat where, under-resourced, only have so many staff dedicated to fundraising. So it's what I hope to learn is how to make the events that we do have, because I don't have a background in event planning either. My history is marketing and business and communications, much similar to several of you guys. So event planning is very new to me. This is my first, I've been in the role for 1.5 years, so I've done some events, but I just want to know how to do it better and make them more successful, especially as we've seen our organization trimming back on some of our events. So how do we make the events that we are doing worthwhile?
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Those of you who online, let me warn you, sometimes you might need to unmute and just yell, hey, I got a question or a comment, or, wave your hands, or, I try to look in the room and online at the same time, but it gets challenging. So don't let me forget about you guys online. So we're going to talk about all the things that you have said and really looking at what can you do to maximize the time that you put into events? And I will be right up front, I am not a fan of special events. And as I think about why, it's really because most of the events I see, I think, are poorly executed. They don't raise money because they don't ask for money, right? And so it's a lot of it's messaging. And so what I see missing in special events are the correct messaging, which comes from planning up front, and the correct follow-up on the back end. Because it's like, okay, let's throw a party. We have a party, and then it goes away. Right. And then it's like, oh, thank God, I can get back to my real job. And so what we're going to talk about today is how do we make those special events really good? Because I think, first of all, I do know they serve a purpose. Oftentimes, however, raising money is not one of those purposes. I was working with a client yesterday, and we were going through his, how much he's raised for different funds, and their special event, their big special event raised $1,500. Oh, and the year before it lost $1,200. And I'm like, okay, there's a problem. And he knows that, right? And that's part of why we're working together. But it's too often I see nonprofits who are like, oh, we had a trivia night and it was awesome. And I said, well, how much did you raise? $900. And what, really? You want to figure out the per hour cost of that? And, so as I kind of thought through it, I thought, okay, what's wrong with special events? And that's what all this comes out of. Okay. And as we were putting the program together this year and thinking about what kind of educational offerings we wanted to provide, my husband and I were doing it together. He goes, you got to offer special events. I go, really? He goes, no, you have to offer special events. And the fact that this has been one of the larger classes so far, do not tell him. We're gonna pause the recording. He was right. So with that caveat, let's jump in. And this is also intended to be interactive. So ask questions, let's talk about your events, let's talk through, what you're doing, what you're seeing. I mentioned to Leslie, but all of you have probably attended events. What's good, what's not good. I recommend attend events because you get to see the good, the bad, and the ugly, and attend lots of different kinds of events. And you'll see, many years ago, I attended an event at Family Resources, and I went, ooh, I like that. And so we started doing that when I was at St. Ambrose, we started adapting it to us. So, you can also steal really good ideas from people. We already did introductions. So really our agenda today is pretty simple. We're going to start with pre-event planning. And we're going to spend a lot of time on pre-event planning because I think that's where a lot of events fall short. It's just kind of like, we got our committee together, let's plan a party. And so I want to talk through what you can do pre-event to make sure that the event day is good, that you're planning your post-event work, and that you are, I'm going to say raising money if that's your purpose. So part of what we got to figure out is what's your purpose, and we're going to spend a lot of time on that. Then we'll talk about what to do at the event. I'm not going to talk about how to contact the caterer, how to get flowers. I'm starting broader. If you guys want to share that information among yourselves, if you've got questions about that, by all means. And then what do you do post-event? Because that's where I think most of the potential lies. If you've had a really good event, you've had, 100, 200, 500 people in a room, all excited about your organization, and then you let them go. So what can you do to keep them engaged after the event? That's where the money comes in. You might raise a good amount that night, but if you keep these people as donors, that gift is just going to keep on giving. And that's really where fundraising events can do the most good. So let's start with pre-event. First thing you have to do is determine your purpose.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but there's a pop-up on the screen.
Thank you.
And it can,
Thank you. I don't look back there.
Yeah,
So
no,
yes,
it's fine.
please tell
Okay,
me when
sorry.
something's going on up there. First thing you have to do is determine your purpose. Why are you hosting this event? And too often, I think when events get planned, kind of jump into, let's do a game. Let's do a golf outing. I'm gonna bash on golf.
That's okay. I don't mind.
Let's do a trivia night. Oh, and you've got a very well-meaning volunteer or board member who goes, I went to a bingo night. We should do a bingo night or whatever, right? A fill in the one. And it starts with the what. You need to start with your why. And everything you do needs to stem from that why. Because if you always keep your purpose at the forefront, then you're going to plan everything towards it, and it's all going to support that. If you've ever seen Simon Sinek, Sinek. If you've ever taken a class from either of us, you've heard Simon Sinek's name. He has a really good TED Talk and a book talked about start with your why. And and about how our brains are actually wired to focus on the why, not the what. And he's got great example from Apple. You know, Apple's a computer company and yet we buy phones from Apple. Why don't we buy phones from, you know, AT&T, who's a phone company? It's because Apple focuses on their why. And he does it much better than I do. But so when you start with your why and you build everything from it, then you're going to be more successful and your events are going to be much more focused. I went to an event a couple years ago and it was the organization had a new leader. They were introducing the new leader. I looked around the room and I went, why were we invited? And during the event, they were thanking us. They might have asked us for money. I wasn't really sure. They were introducing the new leader. It was like, there were like 5 things going on. And I still don't know what the event was intended to do. And I don't know what it accomplished either. I don't know what the follow-up is. So first thing you have to do, determine your purpose. And there's a number of reasons why you might want to have an event. Fundraising is one. And we're going to talk a lot about fundraising events and how do you maximize the resources. But there are other reasons to have events too. The other ones I came up with, you might want a stewardship event. Do an event to thank your donors. In which case you better say the words, thank you. You'd be surprised. And those are going to look different than a fundraising event. You could have a cultivation event where you're trying to introduce donors to your organization, to your project. I was 14 years at St. Ambrose before I started my company, and we were building the Health Sciences building when I was there. We built the Rogalski Center when I was there, and we totally renovated the chapel. Rogalski Center was first. And so we held a series of cultivation events, and we would invite small groups to come. Generally, it was to have lunch. I think we had a couple at breakfast and a couple in the evening, and just learn what we were going to do. Dr. Rogalski was president at the time. He would speak to the group. He drew a lot of people, and we didn't ask for money. We fed them lunch. We made them feel really special. So we weren't inviting every Tom, Dick, and Harry. We were inviting our top donors and saying, we want to let you in on a secret. Here's what we're planning to do. You know, and part of that too is give us your feedback. Or did we change our design based on what they said? No. But some of them did have good ideas that got integrated. And then after that, the first step of the visit's done. And they got to meet with the president, which special, right? And they knew the plans and they were ready to be asked. So different kind of event and a different way to kind of go about approaching people and having an event. And we made them small intentionally. We didn't want a room of 50 people. We held them in the library, which was at that time our newest building. So it was also an opportunity to show off what we had done and to bring people into that building who may not have been in that building before. Some of them, we thank them for helping that happen. So, you know, lots of different things, all of it intentional, all of it feeding the purpose. And they were very successful. Now, I will say we tried that again with the chapel and with the Health Sciences building, and it didn't work. And I think some of it wasn't special anymore because we had just done it. All this happened in the span of like 7 years. Also, the constituents were very specific. Rogalski Center was everybody. Chapel was a subset. Health Sciences was a subset, and those people just weren't engaged. And so that's part of the post event. Why didn't this work? What do we need to do different? So another type of event, you could do cultivation events. awareness events. There's what's it called, the Benavon method? Any of you heard of that? Leslie's shaking her head. It's basically similar to what these are, and Leslie, I'm not gonna get all the details right, so if there's an important piece, pop in. But
Yeah, that's fine. That's what the Putnam uses that.
Yep.
Yep.
You want to explain it?
Oh, boy. I mean,
Sorry,
what
didn't mean to
I
put you
know
on
of
the spot.
it, you are way more the expert, but what I know, my impression of it, so I did marketing with the Putnam, and so strategic advancement was down the hall, but it was a very, very, very specific kind of scripted method of like long-term donor relations and fundraising. So I mean, I was a part of some of the scripting for the museum was you invite people in and you take them on a field trip basically. And it's there's like, even in that, there's like 3 sections of here's your script. You need to have XYZ in that script. You're not asking for money, you know, that kind of it's prepping for the big ask later. So that I guess is a practical application, but I know it was really successful for them one time, and I know that they're bringing it back around now. But to me, when I hear that word, I'm a little bit like, oh boy. The Benavon model.
And its goal, that's good description of it, Leslie, thank you. But its goal is to bring lots of people through your doors. And so, you know, I don't know what the Putnam does. I didn't know they, you know, needed support. And so the ones I'm familiar with, and I'm not sure how you did it at the Putnam, it might be like a breakfast for 50, 75 people. And so here's who we are, here's what we do, something very visual like the Putnam. I assume you took them through and they got to see the exhibits for free and all that kind of stuff. You know, there's no such thing as a free lunch. And so the goal is where the cultivation events are very focused, this is very broad. And to say, okay, if we cast a wide net, if 10% of the 100 people who come to breakfast today eventually make a gift, that's pretty good odds. And it's telling that big story. Key part there, as she said, you don't ask for money. And, you know, all of these you need to keep focused on what is its purpose and do that purpose and make sure you're continuing with that. What other purposes have you had events for, or seen events, or thought of events?
Educational events. I mean, that kind of falls under awareness, but similar.
What do you mean by that, Selena?
So like, I know like our organization in the past has occasionally done events where like we will educate people on certain things. So recently we hosted an animal cruelty investigation thing. It was very specific and a very specific audience. Like it wasn't really in the fundraising space and I didn't have anything to do with it, but it was an event for like police officers, animal control officers, things like that, people like that.
Okay, program related events.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
that's.
Which we could, you know, is that programming, is that fundraising, and you wanna, where is your line there? Okay, good example. What other types of events?
We host partnership events. So with some of our biggest supporters like TPC or John Deere, we'll join with them and host co-ran events. Not so much for fundraising, more for awareness and cultivation. And to show how strong our partnerships are. That way, when we do eventually make an ask on, you know, something based on that partnership, that they have seen that we're successful partners together, that we work well together. So yeah, partnership type events.
Okay, and kind of the co-hosting is a piece that hadn't thought about that as something else we can talk through.
Mhm.
Are you also cultivating / stewarding John Deere and TPC in those
Yes.
events?
Always.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
And that might be one where you've got a couple different purposes going on, but they're not intermingling.
right,
It's like, for this person, we're doing this, for this group, we're doing this.
yeah.
Okay.
I have a question. What is TCP?
TPC,
TPC?
Deer, it's a golf course in
Oh.
Silvis or East Moline.
Oh, okay. Is that where they have their big?
Yes.
Any other type of events?
Our Gross House will do, like we just had a Mother's Day kind of pop-up shop event where one of the women survivors who had just opened her own food truck was there with food. And it's more of like a product event or shopping event almost, but I do feel like that our consumers are typically our donors as well.
So what was the purpose of that event?
The purpose was to celebrate Asisa's new food truck. She had graduated from the program, the part of the organization that focuses on that healing and holistic care. And then it was paired with shopping for Mother's Day. So shop our products for Mother's Day gifts. So I think, yeah, the purpose was twofold. It was get people to spend money, which again, it's such an interesting model, right? To be a nonprofit, but also an enterprise. And then just that celebration acts moment of impact, really. Like, look at what our survivor employee can do.
So from the shopping perspective, I would almost put that similar, the category Selena's, right? It's almost, well, it's not quite program, but it's like, it's not the, and I know it's all nonprofit, but it's different because it is the business side.
Yes.
Because any organization could have that pop-up shopping event, even if they were a for-profit.
Yeah.
But the addition of celebrating one of your graduates does make it, it's not really a stewardship event, but it does give you that opportunity to celebrate. Well, and awareness, I would think there was some awareness building. People who just wanted to come buy the body products are not, and may not have realized what it's supporting, now know a little more about what it's supporting. Yep.
We also kind of take an opposite, well, not an opposite approach, but I host a lot of board member events at our sites. Honestly, to show them like what we're missing. So our board members are extremely educated on our needs, like they actually see what the needs of our kids or our organization is, and then they're educated enough to go out and talk to their circles about it. I don't know if that just falls under awareness or cultivation even, but yeah, kind of showing them what the problem. That way it's highlighted. We don't hide from it, and then hopefully try to fix that problem.
When you say a board member event, do you mean 4 board members?
Right.
They're your audience.
Right, yeah,
And what do you, when you say you're highlighting a problem, can you
yeah.
be more specific?
So just the other day, we have classes at Emice Golf Course, which is a municipality golf course in Davenport. We're coming off of, so just 1 second of background, we just co-built a clubhouse at Highland Springs, which has a first tee classroom in it. And Highland Springs got a new clubhouse. So it's a gorgeous partnership. But that highlighted at our other locations that this is so amazing and we're getting so much out of this that it's really what we need at another program location as well. So I brought our board members to Emice to watch a class happen, to watch these kids sit underneath this picnic bench and get an amazing experience, but nothing like we do at Highland. And it really just kind of helped open their eyes to the fact that, you know, that classroom space is needed at all of our program locations. So now that we've come off a very successful model of doing that, here's another one that we could really do it at. And, you know, now I see the gap.
So board education.
Right.
Yeah, great example.
That is,
And
that's good.
I would say it's awareness, cultivation,
It's all,
a little bit stewardship,
Mhm.
but yeah, depends
good.
on what you're doing
well
and
done.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, great idea. Any others?
Well, I have a question, or I guess just a general curiosity about that. I'd love to hear more about engaging boards in the work of event planning. And just, I think that's what you just said, Sarah, is such a great example, and so smart. But I do feel like that is a lot of times, whether it's a volunteer event planner or someone on staff, how do we get buy-in from the board, and how do you maximize those relationships and those connections so that, and maybe that's a whole nother class of like how do you get your board involved. But I'd love to hear more about that.
Series of classes.
Yeah.
As we talk about kind of the pre-planning part and the planning part, let's make sure we'll weave in board and volunteer, and Leslie, keep that question at the forefront. And let's make sure we talk about that, because there are some ways to get people engaged. And I think part of it is, if you have a good event, they want to be engaged. If it's a purpose-driven event, we know what we're doing, we know why we're doing it, then it's much better than it's just kind of like, oh, I think we should do this, and I think we should do that. Which is kind of how a lot of the events I've worked, a lot. I've only worked on a few, but sometimes it kind of feels that way and it gets frustrating, right? So I purpose driven, I think, will help you in that as well. So once you know your purpose, the next thing you need to do is identify your constraints, because you're working in the real world and your event does have some constraints to it. Your mission is one of your big constraints. So, well, okay, we'll pick on Selena. I'm guessing that like a dog racing event would not be something that would go over with your organization or your staff. Would that be accurate?
That would probably be accurate. We would probably not host something like that.
So, there are things like that where your mission says, no, we can't do it. If you're a rehab program, probably not going to have a wine festival or a beer tasting, right? And as a golf organization, the flip side of that, golf becomes a very natural type of event for you to have, because that's probably what your constituents are doing. Something food related, something nature related, probably something very natural that you would be able to do. On the flip side, Selena, you've done some things with, like, haven't you done, like, I want to say dog fashion shows, or, like something around Westminster dog, something like that might be appropriate. So look at your mission and see what your mission suggests you should or should not do. And that's one of the big ones that you want to look at.
So you don't think it's a good idea at all to do something completely opposite, like we're youth golf, but do some sort of, one of our coaches is a musician. He's incredible. He was here actually at one of your last classes. And I thought about building a fun event off of his musical talent. Do you think that that's doing something completely non-related to what you actually do? Is that a good idea or a totally bad idea?
It's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Doing something antithetical to your mission is.
Yeah.
I don't know what would be antithetical to your mission.
Use tennis maybe or something. I don't know. Like, right.
Right. If you're the easiest example, your drug alcohol treatment program, you don't do a beer fest.
Right.
Let's come drink.
Yeah.
When St. Ambrose started the wine festival, 20 some years ago now, we had that conversation. And it was, 18 to 21-year-olds, or who's on campus, do we really want an event that encourages drinking? 18 to 21-year-olds don't need encouragement. And at that time, a couple things came out of it. One was, it's always the weekend after graduation, so there are not students on campus. So so they're not encouraged to attend. The discussion was also had that if this were beer tasting, that would be different, and maybe this was a justification, not many college students drink wine.
Mhm.
That's for a more sophisticated palate. And so that made it a little more okay. And the Catholic Church certainly has a history of wine,
Mhm.
so all of those things kind of said, we thought that was okay, but we did have that discussion. And so antithetical to your mission is different than not on mission.
Yeah. Can I ask another question?
course.
Just because it's on the forefront of my
Uh-huh.
mind. We have the opportunity to receive money from a marijuana distributing
Uh-huh.
and we're youth. Do you think that that's an absolute no?
I think that's something your board needs to wrestle with.
Yeah,
And I would recommend you have a gift acceptance policy.
yeah.
If you don't, and that goes for all of you, you should have a gift acceptance policy that says, these are the types of gifts we will and will not accept.
Mhm.
I worked at a small college in Virginia many, many years ago, and that was when tobacco was much bigger. And we had an opportunity to get scholarship money from Philip Morris. And so the conversation was, do we accept it?
Mhm.
And the president at the time, I'll never forget his words, he said, the devil's done with the money, it's time for it to do some good.
Yeah,
So it's,
I might use that.
I run into people here who say, we won't accept riverboat money.
Yeah.
Because gambling is wrong, and and a lot of these are organizations for whom the people come to them in part because of a gambling addiction. Right, and so you've got to think about what are the implications. The question I would ask you and your board, if it got out that you were accepting money from a marijuana distributor, would it cause you embarrassment? Is it something you want to hide? If it's
Right.
something you want to hide,
Right,
I would say don't accept it.
yeah.
And that goes also on to, when you're soliciting sponsors for your events. If you don't want to list the sponsor in your program, don't solicit them. So there's not a hard and fast answer,
Yeah.
but I think it's something important for your board to wrestle with
Mhm.
and to come to a conclusion.
Mhm.
I work with a client who won't accept United Way money. I don't remember why. They had a reason. It was a very long standing reason, and actually the CEO was gonna go back to the board to re-examine. But it's, you have to you make those decisions and those distinctions, and it's up to you guys. Okay, but a good question. Your mission is part of it.
Mhm.
That's a big part of
Mhm.
whether or not you accept. Your budget. How much do you have to spend? And I know it takes money to make money. But you don't want to end up spending so much that you don't make any money on your event, if your event's goal is to make money. If your event's goal is not to make money, then it doesn't matter what you spend, but it does matter because you still want to make sure you're staying within your budget. So you don't want to plan an exotic black tie gala that's, super fancy on a $5,000 budget. It's just not going to happen. So you've got to figure out your budget early, and that becomes an important constraint on what you're going to do. What's your timeline? Are you building this around a certain event, a certain, an anniversary? I have a client who's they're approaching, it's like 100th anniversary. That's important to them. And so actually they built their capital campaign around it with the goal of, ribbon cutting on their new facility at that time. It keeps getting pushed back. Now it's gonna be groundbreaking. But are there timelines that you're working within? And actually that's 2 more events we didn't talk about. Groundbreaking and celebrate the end of a campaign, ribbon cutting. Yeah, those are two other types, which are kind of cultivation and stewardship events. The other thing to look at your timeline is what else is going on in the community. You want to try not to have an event on top of another large event. I'm on the board of Every Child, and we do an event the end of April each month. It is end of April because it's Child Abuse Prevention Month. So that becomes kind of the wrap-up event for everything that they do that month. They do a whole bunch of little awareness events as well. You see the pinwheels around, that's them. But one year it was 180. I don't know if you're familiar with them, large social service organization. They had their event scheduled the same night we did, and actually at the same venue. Yeah, they had their event last night, and I saw somebody on Facebook said there was like 1,800 people there. So that's one you don't want to, you know, we had discussions. Do we want to compete with? Now, our audiences were probably fairly different, but we kind of said, okay, from a server perspective, are we going to get any service, right? And what's the parking lot going to look like? I mean, a lot of those logistics, and as I recall, I know we moved venue, I think we moved nights. So you want to look at those things and think about those things. And, you know, if it wouldn't impact your purpose, if it wouldn't impact your outcome, then it's not a big deal. But both events were trying to raise money and probably would have impacted. So look at what kind of constraints there are on your time. If you're doing a golf outing, you're not going to do it in the you know, those kinds of things. What other events are going on? That's the other thing to look at. And your people. Are there certain people who need to be there? And are there constraints on their schedules? Some of it with the wine festival, we wanted the president of the university to be there every year. And so week after graduation is also a good week because chaos has decreased. It was also a very good week for food service and for maintenance, who we were relying on to set up the tent to help with a lot of the logistical details. Doing it the week before on top of graduation would have been tons of people around, but we just wouldn't have had the people power to get it done. So look at that and your schedules. If you're also doing grant writing for your organization, which is usually what's top of my mind, you aren't going to plan an event for April 1 on top of all the local grant deadlines, right? You kill yourself trying to do that. So you got to keep all those things. Questions or other constraints that you've come up against? All right. So with all those things identified now, everything needs to flow from your purpose. So as you think about your different events, you need to plan with all those things in mind. So the first thing is what type of event? So what types of events would you think lend themselves, for example, to fundraising as opposed to stewardship or something, you know, like that? How would you plan around type of event?
I'm curious about this, and I guess I'd love to get feedback, or just what is your sense of people's appetites for events now? Like, I feel like after pandemic, obviously everything kind of shifted, and I wondered, do people want to go to like formal galas anymore? What is your sense of just what do people want to show up to?
And that's a really good question. And I think if it's well done and if the people are connected to your organization and want to support you, I think they'll show up. I think what you're less likely to get are, I'm gonna call them the random people who just come to your event kind of things. What I've been seeing and reading is event attendance is coming back. Last year, it was still low because people were afraid to go out. What I'm seeing is the numbers seem to be coming back, and people are so tired of screens, right? That they are really glad to see people in person. We do screens still, I think, because it's convenient, but not kind of for the event type. I'm not seeing very many virtual events anymore, but I am still seeing the auctions staying virtual, because that does cast your net wider. And one thing I like about the online auctions is you can keep betting while you're sitting at your table. It it was kind of like, okay, I want to watch the auction. Oh, but dinner's going on, and any movement on the auction would die because people aren't out there checking the table. Somebody who really wants it might keep up and going back if it's appropriate. But if they're doing that, and obviously I'm talking about a fundraising event, they're not listening to the speaker, and they're not getting the message of here's the awesome stuff we do, so you're not engaging them as a donor. So I like the online for that purpose. And my husband's one of those who's always bored and sitting there tracking the auction as he's during the event anyway. It keeps them entertained. But that's kind of what I'm seeing. Leslie, how about the rest of you? What are you seeing?
Well, I'm in the middle of actually planning an event, but ours is a appreciation dinner for all of our donors, and anyone tied to my mission, whether it's they donated time or money or in-kind gifts or just really anything related. So ours is a gratitude kind of thing. And it's funny, all of these, so the venue is at the farm, and the time and date was kind of determined because a lot of my donors are farmers. So could not do it during planting season, could not do it during harvest season. After harvest season, it gets cold like the next day. And before planting season, it's raining. So I knew it was gonna have to happen in June, July, half of August. And I honestly picked the date because it was a date that all of my board members could be present. And I have a very difficult board as far as I can't seem to light the fire under them to get involved. So I wanted to make sure that the date was open for all of them to participate. And so that's kind of how I chose all of that. But our type of event is just a thank you for supporting us kind of thing, and no fundraising at all. So
which is part of your audience is dictating those other factors, but your event type is too.
Yes,
as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are you seeing in events?
I know for us, so we've had an event, it was called Mardi Gras Wags and Whiskers, and we actually made the decision after this year to cut it. It was basically, it wasn't a gala, but it was the closest thing to a gala that we've had. There were silent auction items, there was food, there was live music. But it's an event that started off as just like a bar event where people would come, it was Mardi Gras themed because it was around Mardi Gras, and it raised a little bit of money. But it's an event that before COVID had put more and more money into each year. And before COVID, it seemed to be bringing some money in, but nothing crazy. Not, in my opinion, not worth the time and effort put into it. And then I've done it twice since I've been in the role. And we, again, have put more money into it, but we're not seeing the return on it. And to be quite frank, we're not getting the attendance from our donors that we would like either. I think even though we raised more money this year than we did last year, we had fewer of our donors there and more like of our staff and more of our board members and more of like our personal friends and family and not like our true supporters. And to me, that was a big red flag. I'm like, we did raise more money, but we lost our engagement at the event. And so we've also done other events that have worked out super well that are way less expensive that we're focusing on. But I think events that have a main activity for people to do, I think events that people go and they sit around and there's a silent auction and there's like, you know, typical fundraiser stuff to do. Not that people don't necessarily not like that, but at least for our audience, it's not working. Like events that do well that cost really minimal money, like our doggy Easter egg hunt, I spent $20 on and we raised $1,000 from it. Like not a huge return, but also a very minimal investment. Even time-wise, it wasn't very, like you threw treats on the ground. I had to secure a treat sponsor and wow, that was hard. So like stuff like that, I think is more exciting to people, even when for us it's not dog related. Like we do a Drag for Dogs event with another nonprofit in the East Village, and like they organize the drag show and we sell the tickets and they get money from drinks, we get money from ticket sales. And like, no, do we have dogs there? No, the dogs aren't in drag. But we raise a ton of money and we've sold out every time we've done that. We've actually started a second event, which is a burlesque show for cats. And so like people love coming to that event, and I think we're reaching a really new audience for us too. So I think trying to be more unique in what your events are and trying to find stuff that's different is what brings the most people in, and therefore is bringing money in and your return on investment, at least in my experience so far.
Great examples. You also bring up another, another thought in my head as we were talking about sponsorship and should you accept money from, marijuana dealers. Given the current political climate, it'll be interesting to see how your drag, it may bring people out who want to counter that narrative. And just one of those, again, is that the attention you want your organization?
Yeah. We are a little bit more specific where we advertise that event. Not gonna lie.
Yep. Cool.
We do events based on what's happening in the golf world. So a lot of viewing parties for the Masters, for the US Open, for St. Andrews, things like that, where we know that our donors, it's what they like to do. They love Masters commentating. They love Masters branding. So we host a lot of events where it's like viewing parties at TBC, and it'll be more like, it gives us the opportunity to tell them like the state of the First Tee Quad Cities. This is what we're doing. We're having fun. We're watching the Masters. It's casual, really casual, which I think that they really like. I think it doesn't always have to be so serious and everybody sit and listen to this and I'm going to do a PowerPoint. But it seems to be really successful, especially when we have like our Birdies for Charity forms on the table, or it's also like we just did a big apparel sale and we had our apparel out for the Masters viewing party, and people could scan the QR code and purchase apparel, which was a fundraiser for us. We got a kickback from that. So I also think there's different ways of fundraising as well. It doesn't have to be just straight cash donations. They could get something in return and we make money off of that. That's exciting to us as well.
Was it branded apparel?
Yeah.
First Tee branded?
Yeah.
Cool.
We're looking at getting shirts made and selling some. Can I ask who you used for that? Was it someone local?
Yeah, his name was Derek Fiscus and his company is Wad Threads. Like it started off of being a CrossFit thing that he did for CrossFit gyms. So WOD apparel.
Okay.
Or clothing or something. I'll get you.
So they do fundraisers. That's cool. I will.
They do kickbacks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I think what I'm hearing is creativity.
Yeah.
that the standard gala, you know, dress up in a suit and a fancy dress, I think has its place, and I think there are organizations that do that and do that very well. But I think I'm hearing people want different. And which would make sense given how the world has changed, right? We're all working from home in sweatpants. Yeah, it might be nice to put a dress on once in a while, but I also think it's like, oh, I gotta wear pants today? You know, I think there's that mentality. There's also age, generations, right? It's not your parents' stuffy gala kind of thing. And the demographic information coming out says that the younger generation, first of all, they want to do, and they want to give money as they do. They love to buy products that will support, which your t-shirts is a great idea, kind of thing. So it's looking at all those factors. Now, the question is, who are you trying to attract? Right? If you want to raise a lot of money and you want to attract a certain affluent donor, you're going to do something different than if you want to get a lot of younger people together, and you might raise less money, but you might have a different donor pool. So all of those things interact together. And the question is, what's your purpose? Right? I want to raise a lot of money. I don't want a lot of 30-year-olds in there. You know, I might get something else, but a lot of money is probably not going to be it. I want cream of the crop. And how am I going to get that group? It's going to be relationships, because who are they going to bring? It's going to be, what is the event? You know, if there's a certain, you know, if it's $100 a ticket event, that has a certain expectation with it than if it's a $25 event, right? And you're going to get a different audience. So all those kinds of things go into it as well.
So anecdotally, I just want to share that. So we threw a fundraiser for 10 years from 2008 to 2018. And it basically like started when my sister-in-law and I were like in our late 20s, and we were just inviting our friends. And the first year we raised $13,000. Again, like that was just like, hey, it's just our young friends who mostly work in nonprofits. And then 10 years later, every one of those people started moving up in their careers and making a little more money. And we ended raising $75,000. But it was 100% because our audience, you know, the people who came back year after year were just had more expendable income. And I often think about that in just cultivating donors now, and just the huge difference between generations and how they give. And so what you're reminding me, Linda, is just like the purpose. Like, what is your purpose? Do you want to raise a lot of money, or do you want to raise a lot of money in 10 years? You know? Yeah. So that's just, you're clarifying something for me that I've been thinking through.
Well, and life cycles, a good example, Leslie, and you also reminded me of, you know, something I wanted to mention, which is events have a life cycle. And you do need to keep reinventing them. Or, as Selena, you know, pointed out, retire some of them. And, you know, and Leslie, at some point you decided you needed to retire that one because they do get stale. Your donor, you know, they get stale, and it's like, oh, okay, we've been there, done that. Now what else is going on? So that's something you need to keep in mind. And you look at some of the huge events in the community, you know, Festival of Trees is a fundraiser. It's just a very, very long, extensive fundraiser, but it's a fundraiser. And it's what, 25-ish years old? They didn't year one make the money they're making today, right? Those things take a while to take hold, especially if it's becomes one of those community have-tos, right? And there are a handful of those events in the community. And so you've also got to look at that, you know, not just what's this year, but what's our long-term goal with this. If we want to make this our signature event, what do we need to put into it today so it becomes our signature event tomorrow? Right? And what are all the things we need to do for that? Back on type of event and how it flows from purpose. If your goal is to raise money, and some of the other things we're going to talk about, we kind of folded into all of that. But if the type your purpose determines what's appropriate for an event. So if you're going to raise money, if that's your goal, you need to have an opportunity to ask for money. And so something like a golf outing, little harder to ask for money. You can do it, there's ways. A fun run, very hard to ask for money, right? At the beginning of the run, you got hopefully a huge crowd of people. They're all stretching, yawning, etc. Then they run and then they're gone, right? And so in that case, the money you're going to raise is going to be whatever you charge. And, you know, that's the money. But if you want them to, if you want to engage them with your organization long-term, there's not that opportunity to tell your story. Trivia nights. Oh, so many lost opportunities. And I love trivia nights, but I've gone to them for nonprofits, and there was one I was at and I went, who is supporting again? I was invited because a friend needed people at the table, and it was a nonprofit that I knew. But at the end of the night, I went, okay, who was this again? Because they didn't engage the audience in their mission. And they could have so easily had a category, right? You could do a category on pets, or I'm not sure what you do on child abuse. You know, but you know, something mission related, as a way to remind people. And then as you're reading the answers, give the answer and talk about how your organization is part of that, right? Table tents that talk about your mission. Do a mission moment after each of the 10 rounds. Ask for donations after each, you know, there are ways to work it in, but there are also some that are more natural than others. People are going to come to a fun run because they want to run. And I run, walk, color run, any of those kinds of things. They are not necessarily picky about what mission they're supporting. You're going to get your core, but otherwise you're just going to get runners. Golf outings, you're going to get people who are interested in your mission, but you're also going to get friends and people who like to golf. Gives you an opportunity to get in front of people who you might not otherwise, but you got to take that opportunity to do that, right? If we're talking a trivia night, I already talked about those kinds of things. And I don't know who puts it on, but might just be the Diocese of Davenport who does a golf outing, like for, my son was on the Assumption golf team, and I know every year he would work it. And they had the Assumption golfers there, right? And they met you at your car. And so you got to meet the people who you are helping. And Ambrose had a golf outing, and you could buy one of the golfers to hit your shot. And so they had golfers at the different holes. And so you at least had an opportunity to interact with the mission and creative ways to get people to give you money, right? So it's those kinds of ways that you can weave in those opportunities, even in what I'm going to call it, like a non-gala type of event. Does that make sense?
I'll share about a way that we're optimizing a golf outing
Mhm.
opportunity. So we have our annual golf outing fundraiser. It's a great fundraiser for us. But we're also trying a different type of an outing this year where we're comping the golf. So nobody's gonna pay for the golf, and we're gonna have a donor, a board member, and a first tee participant play in a group together. So they're gonna be preset groups. And the whole idea is just they talk, they have fun, the donor gets to see the kid, the board member gets to help really facilitate that conversation and make the kid feel very comfortable. But we're not gonna really ask for anything upfront. We're not charging for the golf. We're gonna feed them as well. And then the follow-up is where the
Experience.
most important part of this will come from, with
Mhm.
especially that donor.
Mhm.
So, and it's like a key, we've identified the donors and that we want to invite to this. So, just a different approach to
Yeah.
trying it.
It's more of a cultivation event at that
Right.
point,
Yeah.
right? And we had a thank you event at St. Ambrose, the President's Club dinner for donors of $1,000 or more. And we did something very similar on the back end. Used to be, it would just be tables and you get together with your friends and eat a lot and drink too much and just, it was a fun evening. And that was good. It was a fun evening. But we intentionally recruited students. And we intentionally placed them at different tables and we intentionally, okay, so you're a business major, we're gonna put you at this table and we're gonna put a business student there.
Mhm.
And it worked really, really well
Mhm.
to do that kind of thing. So yes, there are ways, but all that came from your purpose,
Yes.
right? You wanted to better engage your donors.
Mhm.
Yep, good example.
Yeah.
But if if your main goal is raise tons of money, right, you've got to think about what are the ways you can do that. And that, if you're hosting a luncheon, and I've seen luncheons work very well. They're harder. You gotta have enough time to tell the story and ask for the money, etc. Hard to do in an hour, and most people, that's what they have. Be curious though, back on your question, Leslie, and I don't know the answer to this, how luncheon kinds of events are doing right now. Because it sure seems like, I mean, people working from home, is it, ooh, I can't wait to get out of the house, or is it, nah, I'm in my yoga pants, I'm not leaving today, I don't know the answer, I don't know if any of you have any insights.
First of all,
Leslie?
how dare you call out my yoga pants that I'm currently wearing with my cute shirt and anyway. No, I know that the YMCA still does their luncheon, but again, that's one that I think is one of those, what's the word? Like they've done it for years and years, legacy kind of events, I guess. And I know like the Quad Cities Interfaith used to do at Ambrose like a breakfast. It was a 7:30 to 8:30 or something breakfast. I know the Putnam is doing a power breakfast moment, which is the same idea. You just go before work. But I don't know. I'm not hearing. I guess those are the ones I know of. I'm not sure.
Yeah, be something interesting to kind of keep an eye on. And, if that's something you're thinking of doing, reach out to those organizations that are doing them and say, hey, how's your attendance? Or attend them. It seems like my calendar has fewer of those. And I don't know if that's because I'm not attending or what, but yeah, something else to keep in mind. Once you figure out the type of event, computer went to sleep, the venue becomes the next important question. So if we're gonna do, if we're gonna have a gala, where are we gonna have it? If we're gonna do a golf outing, where are we gonna have it? If we're gonna host a trivia, etc. I love what you said, Kathy, about your stewardship event, having it on your property. I'm a firm believer, the more you can get people into your space, assuming A, you have space and B, it's appropriate, the better. because they get to see what you do, and the more they can interact with the people you impact, the better.
I'm even hoping to put our, I haven't decided yet, but our tables for dinner in the orchard.
Uh-huh.
Even though the orchard is only a year old, so the trees are not mature, it's still, you are in the space. You can see that we have this big orchard and where it's going and that kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
I'm hoping to completely immerse them into that, so.
And what a great, unique experience. And what a great way for them to go, I did that, right?
Exactly, it's tangible, like
Or, you know,
that, yeah.
or
exactly.
wow, you could really use some fencing,
Yes.
you know, right? I
exactly.
mean, or whatever. You know, I think about Niabi Zoo does Pints for Preservation, which, again, what a unique event. It held at the zoo, so you are at the zoo off hours. It sells out most
Yeah.
times, and they could do that at, name the local venue, but it wouldn't be the same. And my guess is it wouldn't be as successful. So think about, with your purpose, what's the appropriate venue to have, to communicate what you want to communicate. Told you about the cultivation events we did at Ambrose. They were very intentionally in the library. When we did the ones, when we tried to do the ones for the chapel, we held them in a room in the chapel. Because of how many of you have ever been in the old chapel at St. Ambrose? It was very nice. It was very historic. It was very much in need of a renovation. And so bringing people in there to see that was what our goal was. Same thing when we did the health sciences building. Challenge of that campaign was we had very successful educational programs in some really, really bad spaces. So again, we tried to get the donors into the spaces so that they could see them, and kind of like what you're doing with your board members. See a class, we can tell you all about it, but let me show you what works here and what doesn't work here. Doesn't work, is it? But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that becomes really important. Okay. Other thoughts, questions on venue? Thinking how interesting something in the Humane Society would be. You'd have to be careful what you did there.
That's something I've thought about, because I know I've seen other shelters do like open houses, but like the parking is limited, like the space inside our building is super limited. Like for me, that's our biggest challenge, is being able to put people in our building and have space for them.
Yeah.
What
That's
about
been our
some-
challenge.
Do you have like a park nearby? Maybe you could do like a bark in the park kind of thing. I don't know.
We do,
You know, where you-
we do an event in a park. It's not, that's another challenge, is the park right next to us that we do have. There's no parking. It's like a community, like residential park. So like, even if we did, like, there's still
Yeah,
that
so-
problem. So, because I've
So
thought about
there's-
having it there.
There's a, I don't know, in downtown, I think it was Rock Island, for a while, they were like kind of advertising storefront space, and they had like a painting that was like, picture this as a cat cafe. Like, you know how in cities they have certain coffee shops or whatever that you like, there are cats that hang out there.
We
Like,
have
you guys
looked,
could do, yeah, you could be like a pop-up cat cafe for like a week or something. I don't know if you could get anybody to, anyway, that just, I'd go. Did you
there's
see my
been
cat
a
earlier?
pop-up cat cafe. We've done one with a couple coffee shops. And there's somebody that reached out wanting to open up a cat cafe in the Quad Cities, but it's still very early stages of that. So don't get too excited. But maybe in the future you might see one.
And again, you know, a lot of these ideas, and I love the ideas and I love the creativity, but you've got to think back to, okay, if we did a pop-up cat cafe, what's the purpose, right? And how do we make it fit our purpose You know, yeah, it would be cute and it would draw attention to the problem and and if that's your purpose, go for it, right? But then you plan it kind of around that purpose. Yep. Let's see. Time and date flows from your purpose. As I kind of alluded to before, a lunch event's gonna be quick, a breakfast event's gonna be quick. You know, what does when you host this say about your audience? Family Resources, I think, still has their big luncheon. And a lot of the people who came they were like attracting people on their work time. And I find if it's a work event, it's better to be 9 to 5 or early to not much later. If it's something they're doing on their personal time, it's better to be in the evenings. And even when we do strategic planning, we'll do focus groups. And, you know, I always get the question, well, what time of day works best? I say, it depends on your audience. If you're pulling donors in and this is part of their workday, during the workday. If you're pulling in broader constituents and this is their volunteer activity and their personal thing, evening or sometimes morning. So same kind of thought process with your events. Golf outings are kind of the exception. I think people are used to taking half a day or a day to do those kinds of events, but that's the exception, not the rule. So think about that as well. Your invite list also determines your purpose. We talked about that a minute ago. If you want to raise a lot of money, you need to have people in the room who have a lot of money. And so you need to make sure your invite list fits your purpose. Now, some of these real focused events, your board events, obviously it's your board members, your thank you event, obviously it's your donors. But you also need to think about, is it every donor? Is it donors over a certain level? Is it, you know, and so you've got to plan your invite list accordingly. If your goal is awareness and we want to bring new people to our organization, then something broad that's going to get attention, that's gonna, you know, maybe not bring your same old constituents becomes an important consideration. Then it's the follow-up that's critically important, or you've lost it, right? Your agenda, what does the event look like is important. If you want to tell your story, you need an opportunity to tell your story. So you need to build the event in such a way that you have a natural opportunity to kind of stop whatever they're doing and tell your story. And know that when you do that, it kind of signals, okay, it's over, and that's when people are going to leave. But you can't have it so long that people are going to be like, oh my gosh, I gotta go, and you lose them as well. So build your agenda that way. Too. Something like, sorry, I keep picking on golf outings. And you know, or a fun run where you've got the activity, the sport, and then people tend to leave. Is there an opportunity, you know, to say something about your organization if that's the purpose of what you're doing? I've seen some where they'll put T cards. Each T, there'll be a fact about the organization. So you're relying on them to read it. That's different than having a speaker up there talking about what you do. If you're doing like a gala type event that has a formal program, have someone impacted by your program speak. The Every Child Gala, they were building the agenda and they're like, any recommendations for who we should have speak? I said, anyone impacted by your services. And they did. Oh my gosh, this woman was beautiful in what she told. So for some missions, that's hard, especially if you're serving people who've been abused, people, but there are also survivors who are ready, willing, and able to give back by telling their story, and there's nothing more powerful. So, find ways to interact the people who are there with the people who are benefiting. That's something with your stewardship event as you go along, the people who are, and I don't know if you'd be close enough to know who's receiving the food, but
Right,
that kind of story,
for sure.
very powerful.
Yep.
Mhm. And your messaging. This is, I kind of said pseudo tongue in cheek when we began, if it's a stewardship event, say the words, thank you. You'd be amazed how often that doesn't happen. When I took over kind of managing the President's Club event at St. Ambrose, and part of that was messaging what everybody said, and I read back what they said in the past, and it was all about, we do this and we do this, and we're so awesome, and we're so totally awesome. And it never said,
Donor.
thank you, yeah. And it was more, here's what you made happen. And we can talk about, we're so awesome, we do such awesome things. But all you have to do is change it to say, thank you. Because of you, we were able to, blah, 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 blah. And that's a simple one. If your goal is raising money, ask for money. And not just in the passive ways of the auctions. People are going to auctions to find a bargain, let's face it. There's a handful who want to do it, I don't want to say just, but to support your mission. But in general, they want a bargain. And so in addition to that, and I'm a convert, I didn't like the fund a cause, stand up in the middle of the room and ask for money. I'm a convert. I like those. I think when they're done well, that's how you raise a lot of money. So make sure that you know what you're doing and why you're doing it. And the other thing I would say is, and stop. So if it's a cultivation event and your goal is to get people excited about your project, don't also ask for money. Stop. Right? If your goal is to thank them, just thank them. Don't also ask for money. Stop. Right? So make sure you again know your purpose and make sure you're messaging toward that purpose as well.
And do you think it's important to be extremely transparent with the invites, like whoever you're inviting with? Like, this is a fundraiser, this is a thank you event, this is, like making sure it's very clear to them, knowing exactly what they're gonna, like, it's a golf outing, that they paid for golf and we're not planning on doing a direct ask. That's pretty clear.
I don't know that you need to be quite that clear or that specific. If it's a golf outing and you're charging, $100 to play a $50 course,
Right.
they know it's a fundraiser.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And in general, and the way you get people to pay $100 to play a $50 course is because proceeds are benefiting First Tier of the Quad Cities. Right. So that's a way to tell them it's a fundraiser.
Yeah.
When it's a cultivation event, I recall the letter said, you will not be asked for money at this event. We want to tell you some exciting news about what's going on at our organization. We will not ask you for money.
Yeah.
And we did not.
Yeah.
This morning I sent out save the dates for this. And I specifically put just a little note on the bottom. This is not a fundraiser. I just really wanted them to know, like, I don't want your money this time. I want to thank you. I think
Are you charging people or is it free?
it's free.
Yeah, that's another
It's free.
indication.
It's like yeah,
Mhm.
you've done enough.
Yep.
Let me care for you.
Yep. And I think how you word the invitation can help with that as well. Come to this dinner as a thank you to our donors, or come to a free dinner as a thank you to our donors, that I think that tells them as well. So yes, there are ways to message it. I don't think you have to be quite as blunt as, this is a fundraiser or this is not. I
Yeah.
think it's, I think when you send it and say silent auction, live auction,
It's assumed.
fund a cause,
Mhm,
they'll know.
mhm.
But if it's new to your audience, I don't, let it be known, we're adding a silent auction to this, or, something like that.
Do you think it's appropriate though, like if it is a cultivation event, to at least talk about our needs or our, like, not ask for money, but it showcase the needs that we have, so almost passively not ask for money, but at least
think
tell
you're
them that
planting
there's
a
still
seed.
need, yeah.
Yeah,
So it's not all just thank yous, it's, thank you, but there's still need out there,
Thank you is stewardship.
yeah,
Cultivation is, we have a need and we want to get you engaged and involved in us.
yeah,
So absolutely in a cultivation event, you're showing them the need.
okay,
And you're talking about your plans.
yeah,
It's not just, oh, we got a crappy clubhouse and wow, I wish we could do something, right?
mhm,
It's, we had a crappy clubhouse and wow, look what we did here. Wouldn't it be awesome if we could do that in Emi's too?
yeah, and that's a cultivation event,
Mhm.
and a stewardship event. You don't think that that type of language is appropriate?
I think, yeah, I think you would do it differently.
Okay,
I think it's, a thank you event is thank you so much for all you've done. We've reached 900 kids this year.
Yeah.
We've turned lives around. Meet Tommy. Tommy, come tell your story about
Yeah.
how First Tee changed your life around. And then you come back and you say, there's still lots of Tommies out there in the community. With your help, we are, making a difference in their lives.
yeah, okay,
And I think,
yeah, that makes sense,
that's subtle,
yeah,
but you're not saying, please give.
right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense,
Mhm. And you can ask for money at an event in a lot of different ways.
right,
You can leave pledge cards on the table. Now, don't just leave them on the table, make sure it's messaged so that there are pledge cards on your table. What you've heard tonight is the need out there. And, please give to help that need. Every child has, after the live auction, there's 3 people up there who are saying, okay, you've heard about the need. It was right after the person spoke so beautifully. It said, who out here wants to give $5,000? Who wants to give 2,500? And, an auction style. So you held up your paddle and they're going, okay, this number, that number, that number. And so it lots of peer pressure in that room. And then it was even like, okay, so I think when they got to $50, they're like, okay, do you think we can get somebody from each table who can give us $50? And, there was one table that everybody had given, I think 150. And they're like, oh, can we have tables where everybody gives $50? So it was high pressure is a little too, but there was peer pressure in that room and it worked. They raised $100,000.
wow.
Yeah.
And do you think people came back to that event the following year, knowing that peer pressure, like that didn't spook them or make them feel
There was,
uncomfortable?
we just had it this year and there was probably 100 more people.
Nice,
Yeah. Now, we're talking about some other things they did
sure.
that helps that too. But that goes back to your invite list. The people who were there had the money to give it. And the people who were there knew why they were there. And my guess is walked in, 90% walked in knowing that they were going to give and how much they were going to give. And the auction's online. And so the other thing in pre-event planning that they did was Facebook told you, here's our auction items and here's our big auction items. So if you wanted to vote, if you wanted to bid on one of those, they have like a cabin in Minnesota or something, you kind of can go, ooh,
Yeah.
that's what I want, kind of thing.
I have a question.
Yep.
So how do you get, like, for me, all your invite list, how do you get some of the people on your invite list? Because there's, for the big money, you know what I mean?
Yep, through your volunteers. Which is the next piece on the slide, right?
Okay,
Who, look at your purpose of your event. What audience do you want there? Can you recruit volunteers who can help you get that audience there? Some of that's your board. Does your board have an expectation to give? Do they give? If they don't give, why don't they give? My guess is they haven't been asked. And when you recruited your board members and you said, we expect everyone to give, that's not an ask. An ask is sitting down with them over coffee and saying, how's your board service been? What could we do better? What do you think about the organization? We really appreciate everything that you do. One of the expectations of board members is that they give, and we appreciate all the time you give. But today I'm here to ask you, will you also make a gift of dollar amount? That's how you get your board to give. Told you I'm on the Every Child board, been on that board for years. And when I signed, I knew I was expected to give. I knew I was going to give. I mean, I can't not, given what I do for a living, but and I wouldn't have accepted it if I didn't. But I think I was on the board 5 months before I made a gift. Was it that I didn't want to? No, it was that I was never in front of my computer at a moment when I thought, oh, make the gift, right? So your board members are busy. They aren't thinking about your organization 24/7. You have to help drive that. And so kind of a roundabout way, Marcy, but get the people on the committee who can help get the people in the room. Because they're going to come because their friends invite them. I'm just gonna say the right people, because depending on your purpose, the right people are different. Encourage them to buy tables and to bring their friends. Ask them to do that. Every year, it's like, here's your opportunities that you can help support the gala. Here's the things that you can do. And we talk about it every board meeting, right? So it's just kind of, hey, it's coming up in 2 months. We still have these opportunities. If you haven't bought your table yet, please do. So keep it out front with them as well.
So I have a question about that. We all are so passionate about the charities, right, that we're working on behalf of. And sometimes I feel like, am I just a cold-hearted snake? Because I want my volunteers to pay for their tickets. Or like, is that an unreasonable expectation? Like, should you be asking volunteers to like buy a ticket? Is that okay?
I would think so. You kind of have to judge that on your own, but if they are that passionate about the mission of the organization to give that much time to it, I don't think it's too much to ask them to pay, $50 to buy a ticket to it, especially if they're there to enjoy the event. If they are truly working the event, that might be a little bit different. That's where I think you kind of have to use your judgment. For me to, sorry, picking on golf outings.
I like it. It's actually making me really like, I'm gonna throw the best, most maximized golf outing ever. I guarantee it because of this.
If I'm a volunteer for the event and I'm playing in it, absolutely I should pay the $100
Yeah.
to play, just like everybody else. If I'm a volunteer and my role is to cart people around and to, you know, refresh the food table and to do, I shouldn't have to pay to do that. So I think that that's kind of the differentiation that I would have. Marcy,
Thank
does
you.
that, yep, does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I also, yeah, and I appreciate the thought, the reminder about reminding my board at every meeting, because I usually wait till closer to the event, and I'm gonna start talking about it all year long, because
Yep.
that's what they need, you know, yeah.
Well, we've not had a board meeting since our event, because it was 3 weeks ago. But my guess is at our next board meeting, we're gonna be told when the next one is and put it on our calendars. Right, and we know it's the last Thursday of April, so it's easy, but, yeah, keep it in front of them. They've gotta, they forget, they don't think about your organization 24/7. And so you've gotta be the one reminding them of all those things, okay?
One thing that
Go.
I was just gonna say, one thing I've done with, I shouldn't say reluctant board members, but like very busy board members, is leading up to the event, I'll provide copy for social media posts, or here's a template email you can send, like just making it as easy as possible for board members to then engage their people, just by literally providing, like, here are the words you can use, just copy and paste this and get your people.
Yep,
So what do you do if you do that, but your board still doesn't participate?
well, and part of it is, I'm a believer, we don't treat our boards monolithically. It is not one board, it is 10 individuals.
Yep.
Right? And each individual brings a different strength to the table. And their strength may not be inviting their friends to do something, and that's okay. Give them multiple opportunities to do things. So, you know, you've got introverts and extroverts. You may have some people who you go, we need to fill a table, and they go, only one, can I have 3? Right? And you may have others who go, beyond my spouse, I don't have anybody who I can bring, want to bring, etc. Have something else that person can do, which is another reason why I'm a firm believer that you build individual relationships with your donors. It's not at a board meeting, okay, everybody's expected to have a table. And I'm sitting there going, I can't afford a table. I can't fill a table. I don't like this. And so what's going to happen? I'm going to retreat. As opposed to, can I only one? Can I have 3? Right? And then let that person do that. When you're meeting one-on-one, you can also have the conversation of, in addition to asking them for a gift, prior to that, there are numerous opportunities to serve the organization and to serve its development role. Here's some of the things that we would love for you to do. And part of that conversation at an event, we've got our events coming up, or we've got 3 events this year. You could sponsor, you could invite people, you don't rattle them off, but just kind of, what's been your experience with events? What's worked for you in the past? And if they go, oh, love to get tables. Awesome. Can we count on you to buy a table or 2 at our event? Or hate buying tables, but I've got a wine cellar. Well, you know what? We've got a wine pool. Could we count on you to donate a couple? Fine. Listen to them and find a way for them to contribute to the event in a way that's meaningful to them. The other thing is, if they're a reluctant board member, it may be they've not served on a board before, so they really don't know what's expected of them. I've heard lots, I'll talk to people about serving on boards and they're like, I'm not asking for money. You don't have to ask for money. You have to be involved in development work. You don't have to ask for money. Or I'm not going door to door, knocking door to door. Maybe you've knocked on doors, right, for your development work. It's not what it is. They don't understand. Whereas if you listen to them and find out what do they want to do, and you ask them to do it, they feel good, you feel good, thank the heck out of them. Next year, I bet they'll do more. And the next year, I bet they'll do more. But to expect every board member to buy a table or to, donate an auction item or to, everybody's at a different place. And so they can't all do that. Anything else pre-event? Before we jump into the event?
I'm always curious on how people price their tickets for events. I mean, I obviously know that there's costs associated with it and you have to factor, and there's a number that you can get to, but I am always curious how people set the price for their tickets, like besides the food and whatever you purchase that factors into the price. How do you know what to set ticket prices at?
What's your audience? What audience do you want?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other way. Do you want a $25 audience? Or do you want $100 plate audience? Or $150 a plate audience, right? Your ticket price is gonna determine who comes. Do you want, was the JC's did like brouhaha and beer tasting. And I think tickets were like $25 and they got tons of people there, right? Because lots of people drink beer, can afford $25, right? Wine festival, I haven't looked lately, but I think it's like 60 or $75 a ticket. That brings a very different audience. So that really becomes one of your determining factors. We, back to golf outing. At Ambrose, when we did our golf outing, I remember there was a discussion, and I don't remember who was on what side. One faction's like, we need to charge little because we want to get lots of people there. And the other side was, no, we need to charge lots. We need to get the right people there and we need to raise a lot of money. So what's your goal? All comes down to purpose. Sorry, I don't have a magic.
No, that puts clarity behind it, definitely.
Yep. And you're gonna charge more to play TPC than you are emails. Right? Although, people are they're gonna pay, if they wanna support you, they're gonna pay. By EMIs, because they're not paying it to play. They can do that for a whole lot cheaper any other day. Yep. This is a good break point. So why don't we take 5 and we'll come back in here. It's about 1/4 after. We'll come back about 20 after and talk about the event and the post-event. And there's one more piece pre-event I want to talk about too. So see you in 5.
Oops. I'm gonna go use the bathroom real quick.
Sarah, there's a restroom right outside the door too.
Where is Agro's house located? Is it in Iowa?
And Illinois.
Oh, two?
Yeah, they started in Iowa in kind of off of downtown Davenport
Okay,
and then in a house.
yeah.
And then they bought property in Moline.
Oh,
And so they've moved their production to Moline
okay.
and the house is now literally a house.
Yeah.
It's housing some
Interesting.
violence.
Yeah.
Linda, I should know this, but are you on the board of Argro's house?
No, I write grants for Argo's house.
Okay, I knew you wrote grants. I wasn't sure if you're on board.
Yep. All right. Questions that came up during the break? One other pre-event thing that I do want to mention that I failed to put on the slide and then I forgot. If you're gonna do, if you're fundraising at your event, if that's your purpose, and especially if you're gonna do like a fund a cause kind of thing, treat it like every other campaign and seed it ahead of time. The worst thing to do is to go, we got nothing, what can we get from the room? Because nobody wants to be the first. Or to go, okay, who wants to give 5,000? 2,500? How about $2? Right? Because that's what happens. And so you want to secure a lot of those gifts ahead of time. And you want to then, so what every child does is they came, and I don't have the numbers correct, so forgive me, but they came into the event like saying, we've got $30,000 in a challenge pool. And they have slides going during the event, and it says, here's who's given to the challenge pool, not how much, but here's what makes up that money. And can we match it? And then when they start the auction part, they already have people. So we know you're gonna get 5 and you're gonna get 2,500. And it's not, it's that we talked to you ahead of time, right? And in fact, it's, you know, oftentimes it's gotten now to where, yeah, I'll give 5. Do you want it in the challenge pool or do you want me to stand up? And some of it depends on who's gonna be there, right? And if the donor has a preference, obviously you honor that preference. But it's, they want to give, they want to support the mission. And so when they say, well, you give 5,000, somebody's there going, yep, I got it. And, you know, then they have a couple people giving the lower amounts and then it's off to the races. So do your homework ahead of time. In addition to, as Leslie says, you know, give your board talking points, give, or anybody that you want to share your information, always make sure you're preparing them. And Decker's on your board, right? He's the one who does our auction. He's very good,
Yeah, he's awesome.
very good.
Yeah, he doesn't let you leave without, without picking
Is
on
that
you.
an auctioneer?
No, he's actually city manager of Bettendorf,
Oh, okay,
but huge personality.
okay.
And he and 2 others like do charity events around town
Really?
and knows everybody, picks on everybody. And I mean, sometimes you go, I cannot believe you just said that.
I say that, he's our board president, and I say that often.
That was 100% my husband.
But you know, and in your community, maybe that's who does it, right? But you know, I mean, it works.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you gotta do what works. All right, so at the event, you do need to make sure the event runs well. You don't want, you know, all the pre-planning and everything to fall apart, because that is what people are gonna remember. It's interesting, I was talking to a couple of friends, both fundraisers, and they were talking about an event they went to, and they said, this has to have been the best event I've ever attended. And I said, okay, tell me more. Why? And it's interesting. They said food was average, venue was, it was okay. But the messages were awesome and they felt leaving inspired. So more about, don't worry about the centerpieces, just have them, etc. But if you're doing the pre-planning and things are running well, that's what's going to be important. So at your event, to assure a good event, first thing you have to do, make sure everybody's prepared. If they're speaking, if they're, you know, welcoming people at the front desk, if they're checking people out, just make sure everybody knows their role and don't assume. So do, you know, if you need to do a dry run, whatever you need to do. I was with a group the other day and somebody said the worst thing when you volunteer is you volunteer and there's nothing for you to do. Or you don't know what you're doing, right? So make sure that everybody who's part of putting on the event knows what they're doing. Plan for all contingencies. What do we do when this happens? What do we do when that happens? Hopefully, if you're the one planning the event, you are one of these calm people who nothing rattles. If not, find one of those calm people who nothing rattles, because you know what? It's gonna happen. So, you know, make sure you're planning for all those different contingencies. Keep your guests at the forefront of everything you do at the event. As you're thinking about how the event's going to roll out, you know, when's dinner, where are the bars, where are the, you know, all that kind of stuff. Think about how your guests are going to experience the event. And make sure the flow is right, have enough bars, have enough buffet tables, Work with the venue to make sure they're gonna, doing their role. If they're dismissing tables, are they doing it in the right order? All those kinds of things. Just make sure you always keep them at the forefront. Don't have your check-in line so long that it's 10 minutes to check in, right? Or if you got to get a lot of information, have 10 people doing it. Have someone greeting people at the event. I keep using every child. At that event, one of the vice presidents was out front greeting people, showed me to my table, and I went, you really don't have to do that. But it feels nice. It feels nice to feel important. So just kind of think about what can you do to help the guests feel good. At the event, my son worked the golf outing. They would go and bring the clubs out of people's cars and they would drive the clubs to their car. He loved it. He's super social. So he would be out, meeting people and talking to people. And again, it's just that little extra touch that can help your guests feel like they're more important, that they are important. Always everything is your purpose. So I mentioned the family resources gala I went to that I stole an idea from. It wasn't a gala, it was a luncheon. And on the tables, instead of having, fancy centerpieces of flowers that they, probably spend $1,000 on flowers for an hour, and then they go, okay, somebody take them home. They had items that were needed in their shelter. So it was, I don't remember what ours was, but maybe a pack of diapers or, something like that. A, they didn't waste the money, they donated whatever was there. And B, what a cool reminder of why we're there.
In front of you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not because the first $1,000 I give is going to these flowers that look pretty and I'm taking home. But they're really helping the women in the shelter. And we did that at Ambrose. I'm like, I want to do that. What does that look like?
Yeah.
It was
What'd you come
hard.
up with?
It was hard.
That would be very hard.
We put I think we got some beakers from the chemistry department. I think we put some books.
Oh, that's.
And
Mhm.
turned out it wasn't things we bought to donate, because that would have been scholarships and a pile of cash in the middle of the
Yeah.
table. Wouldn't have quite worked. But it was still things that represent higher education and our students and those kinds of things.
Mhm.
And I've seen that done at some other events too. And I think that's really cool. It's different than, flowers. And I like flowers, but for
I
you,
think
flowers
that's so
are-
smart. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think that's so smart, and I think that the younger generation, that's coming up, kind of to become those bigger donors, notice those things. I think older donors do too, and I'm totally generalizing, but I do think those are the touches that the younger kind of coming up generation is just like, yeah, I don't need the fancy flowers and this stuff. Like, I want to make sure these dollars are, I think that it
Mhm.
reflects the values of the organization as well, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yep, exactly. And when I worked at Ambrose, and at the end of that dinner, we would always say, take home the flowers, or, if your birthday is closest to today, you get to take home the flowers, whatever cute thing we had come up with. The end of the night, half the flowers were still there. And we ended up taking them home, or giving them somewhere, but it's what a waste of money,
Mhm.
right? And I was there in 2008 when the recession hit and the economy went kaplunk. And we had a conversation about that dinner that year. It was, open bar, nice steak dinner. It was probably, I'm gonna guess $50 a plate kind of thing. And it was great because it was for our top donors. We had a conversation, do we do that this year? Can we? And it was, I believe at some point, black tie optional, fancy dinner. Is this right to be doing here? And what we ended up doing was we still had the dinner. We did scale it back a little bit. We had live music some years. I think we maybe didn't do the live music, you know, so again, that's not, that was our purpose. We're thanking them for what they did. We wanted them to feel important. It was also an opportunity for them to hobnob with other important people. So we try and put people together. But we also didn't want them to go, wow, yeah, you gave this money and we just wasted, you know, 50,000 or whatever it was on this event. So that's something to keep in mind. And unfortunately might be one of those things we need to keep in mind coming up as the economy gets worse. But, you know, I think about Kathy, your event and, you know, a farm to table kind of food. It would be so awesome if you could serve your food and I don't know if the timing would work, but
Yeah, we're keeping it very simple because I think simple can be very elegant. And we're also incorporating it'll be outside, which my contingency plan for rain. It'll be obviously a tent, but I'm not sure how well that'll work. But also, you know, there's a lot of environmental waste that goes on at events like paper products and that kind of stuff. But we are gonna have like actual real plates and like those things are important to me because that sends a message to like everyone, how we act responsibly as a farm and as it's not just food, but it's everything. But yes, keeping it simple, but hopefully spot on. I don't know.
yeah, cool. Well, and I could see if you put flowers on the table, them being just a simple wildflower
Wildflowers,
spray, not a huge bouquet
Arrangement,
of,
Yep,
of flowers that
exactly.
were obviously shipped from way far away.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yep.
So, and, you know, down to every detail, you know, make sure you're keeping that at the forefront. And we're gonna talk about follow-up in a minute, but some of good follow-up is collecting the information you need to follow up.
Yeah.
If you don't know who's there, how are you gonna follow up with people? So how do you capture who's there? And that's easier with some events. It's harder if it's just a walk-up kind of event. But if your goal is fundraising and it's not just today, but tomorrow, you don't do a walk-up event, right? Or you find a way to capture that. Okay. How do you work the purpose? First is with your flow. You've been to an event, fundraising event, and the purpose is raising money. And they have a silent auction and it's way off in this side room somewhere. Not gonna get very many bids. Right? If it's, you know, if you want people to have a good time and you've got one bar and the line's 20 long, they're not going to. So think about the physical flow of the event. How are you going to move people through? How are you, you know, if you want to communicate about your event, you can do it with placards, right? Pictures of your new clubhouse, right? When you did the ribbon cutting, pictures of where you started, pictures of where you are, you know, in strategically placed locations that people are going to walk through it. Standing in line at the bar is a really good place if you have a bar. You know, just think about those kinds of things and think about the flow of the event, also not just physically, but how is the event moving along? As I said before, you want to have an opportunity to share your message with the people, probably. If you want to have an opportunity, when are you going to do that? You want it to be late enough in the event that, you know, they've had time to bid on the silent auction, they've eaten, they've drank, they've whatevered, but not so late that you've lost half your audience. And once you do that, that's kind of the signal, the night's over or the event's over. Unless you have music or, some other reason for them to be there. So think all of those pieces through as well. I've gone to some events, especially if they're a work night, where they start the program during dinner. And I like that. I'm an early to bed person, so I can get to bed early. The downside of that is what it takes away is the time to network. So it's during dinner when you're chatting with the people at your table, you're getting to know them, if they're not the people you brought, etc. So again, think that through. Which purpose, who's your audience, and how's the best way to manage that for them, okay? Your menu. How does your menu support your purpose? We were talking about that a minute ago when I was talking about Kathy's, menu for her dinner. If you're feeding hungry people, kind of hard to have a gourmet dinner. But kind of hard to charge $100 for soup and salad, right? And there are some organizations, it's in the fall, there must be a month, hunger prevention month or something in the fall, where they will do lunches that are soup and bread. And it's an awareness raising, it's a money raiser as well. But again, think about what does your menu say about your purpose and your audience, and everything as well.
I was actually, for my particular event, I was actually gonna have, so in our community where I live, 1 in 8 people struggle with food insecurity. So I was going to strategically take away every 8th plate at the table. And then as we sit down, talk a little bit about that and talk about, some of you may notice there's a plate missing. Imagine if you were that person.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that's
But I get so emotional.
That's but I think that's okay. I think that's the passion, right? I've had, I told you before, I've one of my firm beliefs, you have to have someone who's been impacted by your mission speak. And usually the pushback I get is, oh, but they're so rough. If you had a 12-year-old talking, are they going to be a polished speaker? Probably not, but that's okay. And in fact, I think that's even more impactful. I love TED Talks, but man, sometimes they're so smooth that you kind of, it draws away from the impact of what they're saying. So, I wouldn't worry about that either. We talked about decorations and how your decorations can support your purpose. Certainly your agenda has to support your purpose. We've been talking about that too. You got to ask for money if that's your goal. And how do you work that in? And you got to say thank you if that's your goal. And, your speaker can be someone who says thank you. And you do need to prep your speaker, right? Or your speakers, and make sure everybody's on message, that everything is supporting everything you're trying to encourage that day. I don't like scripted messages because unless you've got an incredibly talented person, they sound read and that you're being read to. There are some people you have to script, and if you have to script them, you have to script them. But certainly I would have talking points that say, here's what we need to talk about. This is a thank you event. So don't just talk about numbers, talk about impact. Your event not only has to focus on your why, but your message should talk about your why, right? You teach golf, but, right? That's a mechanism to teach a lot of other things, keep those kinds of things at the forefront as well. Messages I just talked about. Questions about at the event?
I have a question. I was gonna maybe save it for later, but I feel like it's appropriate here. You've been
Uh-huh.
talking about the online auctions and how you can bid from your seat. Do you have a platform you recommend for that?
You didn't ask, I could probably remember what it is.
The one
I
Julia
use-
Bordeaux Highland uses for Mardi Gras, is it One Cause?
One
or,
Cause, I think, has one.
Okay.
This last year, I just used
think of
Give
it.
Butter. It's a
Give But-
newer Give
what is-
Butter.
Give
Like
butter.
butter is in like butter. And I used it because we were testing it out. It was actually, it's free to use. There's still obviously transaction fees, but there's like a tip option to like tip the platform. If you
Okay.
leave that on, it's free to use. So I've been recommending that to people who are very, very low budget organizations.
I'm trying to think of, there is an on-site one that will come and manage the whole process for you, and it's really high end. And then it'll go as far as like send customized text messages to the people bidding, that their item has been, you've been outbid, now it's your time to step up, like.
Mhm.
We
What's
use
the-
that.
Yeah,
Give
there are
Smart.
some really advanced ones. Give Smart, that's another good
That's
one.
that's who we used. They Give Smart. You have to pay for it, so it's better if
Yeah,
you use it for more than one event. But you can also do all your ticket purchases through there too, and track everybody who buys tickets, and they can make donations to that site. So we did our silent auction, ticket purchases, and then people can make donations through it. So it's kind of like a one-stop shop, which is kind of, and we didn't pay them, but if you want at the event, they can either come in person or be like online to assist you. I am not a techie person, so the nice part with theirs is they're very user-friendly. In some ways, it's almost too basic on their templates to use, but they have like little tutorials that are like a minute or 2 minutes long to learn how to use everything. So I appreciated that.
I'm looking to see what, because the ones that I've used, they do send that
Mhm,
emails or the text, which are
Mhm,
awesome, because it
mhm.
keeps you bidding.
mhm.
And you can also put in there, okay, I'm bidding 20, but automatically
Yeah.
put me up to 70, so it'll automatically up. It looks like it's BidPal, which is One Cause.
Yeah, that is One Cause.
Yep, and then there was another one in here, that's One Cause too.
I
Thank
would
you.
caution you though, One Cause, we have One Cause, and if you are not techie, it's complicated. Definitely,
You have to have a 1-year subscription,
3.
3-year subscription,
Mhm.
okay.
Yep. Yep, we're working on our 3rd year right now, and I don't think we're gonna renew. It's just too complicated, honestly, especially when we're working on platforms like Constant Contact, an email platform that is the simplest
Mhm.
to use. In my head, if it's something can be really simple, it should be.
Yeah.
And I think One Cause they're great, but very complicated.
So Give Smart, I was just gonna say, Give Smart is a 3-year contract, but we only went with them for 1 year the first time because we wanted to try it out and not get locked into something for 3 years. And then we went to them again because I thought they were pretty simple to use. So I would look at them, but you have to pay, but I feel like they're pretty easy to navigate.
And once you pay the subscription, you can use it at whatever event, like multiple. Okay. Thank you so much. That's super helpful.
The more you use it, the cheaper it really is if you divide it up for your cost. So it's better to use it more than less.
But not better to have 100 events in a year.
Yeah.
Leslie, the other thing I would say is that the nonprofit community in this community is incredibly giving. So reach out to some of the people who do larger events and ask them what they use and what their thought process on them is. I saw on Channel 8 this morning talked about how Children's Therapy Center's online auction is open now. I don't know how they got that sponsorship, but that's awesome.
Good.
go on and look, see what they're using, or call them maybe
Yeah.
after this week and see what they used and what they thought, but. QPT uses it, Food Bank, Every Child, like, lots of people are now going to at least the online auctions.
Mhm.
All right, post-event follow-up. Almost as important as pre-event planning, because as I said at the beginning, I think this is where a lot of events fall short. Because, yeah, you had people captive for an hour, for 2 hours, for 3 hours. Hopefully they had a great time. Hopefully they learned something about your organization. If they didn't, you're not doing your job very well. Don't let them go. Okay, make sure you're following up with them. First thing you have to do, thank them. Told you I went to the Every Child Gala on Thursday night. This was in my mailbox Saturday night. So what they, and it's simple, and it had my name on it. It didn't say name. They were printed ahead of time. I asked Brooke, I'm like, okay, how did you do that?
Mm.
Knowing this was coming.
Yeah.
She had them printed and she knew who was coming. And so everybody, she had the, they were printed, and I'm not sure, she dropped them in the mail Thursday morning or Friday morning. And then everybody, she also had postcards, and everybody who came, that's what she did Friday. If she didn't know them ahead of time, printed out labels and stuck them on them, and they probably got them by Monday.
Wow, that's perfect.
And I have a certain affinity for the organization being on their board, but you don't see this in organizations, and how impactful is that? And it says in here, your support helped us raise $90,000. She was hoping, because that was printed ahead of time,
Oh, yeah.
but they had half of it up front. And based upon previous experience, pretty safe. Actually, they raised more than that.
Oh, I bet she was like, dang it.
Even if they raised 85,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter.
Right.
This
The
is
spirit is
marketing.
still there. The spirit's still there.
And if I wasn't on the board, I wouldn't know that.
Yeah.
Right? And I go, wow, that little bit I gave really made a difference.
It does make you feel like you're part of a whole.
Yep. And it's not just the number is outcome. It's not just we raised $90,000, but it is, thank you for believing childhood well-being is a community issue and ensuring that our community's kids have support and resources they need to thrive. So tell me not just your output, tell me your outcome.
Yeah.
Tell me what difference I've made in the community. And because that's what's going to keep people coming back is, ooh, I want to support kids. I want to give them healthy, happy childhoods. This is how I can do that. Okay. Now, how did they get these out to people so quickly? Right. One of the things, another thing they do that I really like is, after an event, you stand in line for 20 minutes to pay for your auction item, and you're going, oh, I would have given more, but I didn't bring that. I don't take credit cards. And first of all, think about how much money the people you want them to spend, and make sure you can take whatever way. They will bill you. And so how they do that is when you register, you give them all your contact information. And so we had a table, and I didn't know addresses for everybody at my table. And so I gave them names, and I gave them what I had for email addresses. And when they checked in, they gave them all the other information. So now she knows what's the new information. Spent Friday morning after the event, exhausted, filling all that out. And then, so they get a postcard in 24 hours too.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
That's really awesome.
And then last week I got a letter from them with a thank you and then the invoice, but, again, keeping people engaged, thanking them. So think about how can you capture that information for everybody who's at your event.
So I'm
Leslie?
sorry, did you say that as they were coming in, they captured that? So like at the
Yes.
registration table?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And sometimes on the online, if you're doing like the auction stuff online, sometimes it's on there. I don't know the back end of that enough. Sarah, I don't know if you do. If I put my address and stuff in the online auction platform, do you have access to
Mhm.
that too?
Mhm.
The other reason to do online, but you may not capture everybody
Right.
because if I'm not planning to bid, I'm not gonna sign up.
Exactly.
And there are people who are leery to put their credit card in something like that. I know it asks for your credit card because if you win, it takes it
Yeah.
off right away. So you
They
don't
want
have
you to
to,
pay right away. Yeah.
you don't have the problem of chasing people down to get them to pay for their auction items.
Mhm.
You know?
So what do you think is the return on something like this? Like this feels really good. This tells me that this organization is on top of it. And so I trust everything they're doing. But obviously a full color two-sided postcard comes at an expense. And so what's your recommendation on, is it when you have the limited funds that so many nonprofits do, like, is it worth the expense of, I don't know, like a follow-up mailing? Like, I guess I'd just be curious about the, maybe even like the data behind this move.
I'm trying to remember the cost to raise $1 from an event. I think it's 50 cents to raise $1 is what I recall the overall data is. And I don't have the data, but I would say 100% it is worth the cost to send a postcard. It's not that expensive. And there was, let's say, 250 people in the room. If it's even $1 a postcard, it's $250. To acquire a new donor through the mail costs between $125 and $150 to raise $1. You're losing money on donor acquisition. Once you have a donor, to retain them costs $0.25 to raise $1. So what you've got is a pool of everybody in the universe who could potentially support your cause. You now know 200 people who at least are one step closer. Now, are all of them going to give? No. But then you start to see, okay, who's responding? And, who's expressing an interest, who's coming back next year? And you're building that pipeline. So I would say you can't afford not to. And that's how you continue this event that, for them raised $90,000. It's gonna not only raise more than that next year, it's going to raise more all year long. And you can trace it back, but it's gonna happen. Okay?
Plus that card is relational, like
Exactly.
you sent it to me and I have it.
Yep.
It's a little reminder of a relationship.
Yep.
That's a good way to put it, because I was thinking, for Leslie's purposes, well, an email thank you is pretty much free, but
Right.
the way you just said makes it very
it's all
clear.
about- Yeah.
And if you absolutely can't afford it,
Yeah,
an email. I don't know about you guys, I get 100 emails a day.
yeah,
Yeah.
And that one would go into, I have them sorted, so those that are, for me, go here, and those that are, I don't
But
wanna
it's-
call it junk.
yeah, less
It's
attention is
the
needed.
It's the difference between, that was nice, to, oh, look, they thought about me. Like, it's a totally different kind of
Yep.
perspective, I think.
And how much personal mail do you get in your mailbox? It's not a bill,
Right.
even birthday cards, right? I mean, we don't get mail.
Anymore.
And so I think that adds to it. Really cool would be a handwritten card, but you're not gonna do.
Need little
500.
elves.
But the way printing is these days, I've gotten handwritten cards that aren't handwritten cards.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, that's another way to do it.
Mhm.
That does add expense, but.
Yeah.
So key is keep them engaged. What are some of the ways to do that? The other thing you do the next day, or, you know, within a couple days, call your key guests and volunteers and thank them for coming.
Even if they're gonna get a postcard or
Yep.
something.
Postcard took till Saturday.
Right.
You know, even less than mail, how many phone calls do you get? Not a text, but a phone call. Now, I'm not talking about all 200. I'm talking about, you know, your top donors, the one who bought the expensive package, you know, the ones who you were really excited to see there, right? You're starting or continuing a relationship. And these don't have to all be you, unless you are the executive director. You can, you know, you can have the executive director do that. You can ask board members to do that. What a great way to get your board engaged without them having to ask for money. I find board members who don't want to ask for money are usually willing to say thank you. Give them a script, give them half a dozen people, tell them I want these done the next day. And you know, chances are if they call 5 people, they'll leave 4 voicemails, but that's okay. The other thing you need to remember is the power that the title board member has and the power that title board chair has. We work with boards all the time, right? And there are those annoyances that we have to deal with. But you know, to have a board member take the time to call me, wow, I'm really important, right? So keep that in mind too, of who else can help you do that. And you don't have to be the one doing the postcards too. That's another great volunteer role or a board member role, right? If they've got the next day free, I know you don't want to do X, Y, well, I don't say it that way, it's a like punishment. But, you know, you like to do office kinds of tasks. Here's what I need you to do. These have to get out the next day, get them out. I was working with one organization who said they would write thank yous to their volunteers and drop them in the mail on the way home. Or drop them in the mail on the way there to get it even faster. So those phone calls are another great way to keep people engaged. Research just came out that said, if you get a thank you out within 48 hours, and this wasn't event specific, this was gift specific, your chances of follow-up gifts went up, and I don't remember the number, but substantial. Wow. Yeah. Think about it, we're in an instant gratification society. And that, you know, you make a gift online, you go, where's my thank you? You know, when I was taking classes online, I remember I'd submit my paper and be checking 10 minutes later for the grade. I've taught long enough. I know it's not going to be there. I know it doesn't work that way. I would be mad if it did work that way, right? But it's like, I'm done with it. Where's all my gratitude for doing it? So you've got to feed into that cycle as well. Identify your major donors. This you can take till the next week, take a breath, sleep everything off. But you should have a list of everybody who attended. You want to actually do this before your event too. Know who's coming. And then before the event, you're kind of alerting your executive director, if that's not you, or yourself, if it is. You're alerting your board chair, your board members. Hey, we've got, you know, there's this Bill Gates person coming. I think maybe we should pay some attention to this person, right? And so you're assigning people to make people feel extra special. After the event, look and see who came, because you may not know who all is at Bill's table. Now you do. Look at who made the large gifts, who bought the expensive items. These may be people you don't know. But if they're at your event and spending, you know, a couple $1,000s on an auction item, they have some disposable income. And don't just identify who they are, call them. You know, week or two later, this one doesn't have to be immediate, but hey, you know, Joe, I just wanted to thank you so much for coming to our event. I hope you had a good time. What'd you think of the event? People love to give their advice. They love to give their opinion. So ask them for it. I don't think we've met before. You know, I'm the executive director. I'm the development person. I'm the whoever you are. Would love to sit down, have a cup of coffee with you and just get to know you a little better and find out what's your connection with our organization? Where does your passion lie? You may now have a new donor. And they've received your postcard. If you're sending a follow-up letter behind that, so you're not their first touch, you're their third after the event. They feel good about the event. And they're not stupid, they know why you're calling, right? So and now you just added a major donor who might be giving you thousands for years and years and years. So identify who your major donors are and put them in your major donor pool and work them as your major donors. Everybody, add them to your mailing list. This is a great way to feed your mailing list. Send them your newsletters. Ask them for gifts. They don't care that they just came to your event. Put them on your birdies list. Now's the time to ask them. Too often it's like, oh, but they just gave. Yeah, which means they feel good about you and they might give again. And, you know, you need to hear a message 7 times for it to really resonate and for it to really stick. Your newsletters, your solicitations are those letters or are those touches. So even if they don't give, keep asking them until they unsubscribe from your newsletter or until they, you know, say, take me off your mailing list. If your mailing list gets too unwieldy and cost becomes a concern, then you can start cutting it back. If they haven't given in 5 years, I'm not going to mail to them or do some email appeals. There are some cheaper ways. But while they're excited about you and excited about giving, strike while the iron's hot, right? Ask them to support your organization. Invite them again next year. Put them on your invite list. Even if they came as someone else's table, if they had a really good time and you say, hey, you know, we're inviting you again. They may come again. They may bring a table, right? That's how you get that kind of exponential growth in your event, is because now they're going to bring their friends and bring their friends, etc. Okay. So make sure you're keeping them engaged all along the way. You also want to do a post-event analysis. As sad as that I am, Selena, to hear that an event has gone away, I'm also excited that an event has gone away, because too often it's like, well, why do you do that event? Because it's May. No, that's not a reason to do the event. The reason to do the event is because it was a good, appropriate event. So as you're doing your analysis, you want to look at, did it meet its purpose? What was its purpose? Did we stray from it? And especially if you're meeting with volunteers, it becomes really easy to stray from your purpose. Oh, well, we should have a mariachi band. Okay. How does that help us fulfill our purpose? Right? It would be cool, but will that help us raise more money? And you know, that becomes the lens through which everything gets looked. And it's much easier to say, did we meet our purpose of raising money, because you can quantify that. Your stewardship purpose, your cultivation purpose are much more long-term. So if it's like these smaller cultivation events, did people show up? Are we following up with those events? Absolutely, you have to follow up. What we would do is they came to the event this week, we had a schedule, that they got called next week. How'd you like the event? What questions do you have? We'd love to come talk to you a little bit more and invite your participation, right? If they just come to the event and go, wow, that's really cool, and nothing else happens, then it wasn't a worthwhile event. On a stewardship event, you're looking more at what's our donor retention data. Are these donors continuing to give, and are they giving more? I would still follow up with them. And I would still, what'd you think of the event? Thank you again so much for coming and for everything you do. And again, make sure you listen. And probably in fairly close proximity to when the event was. So, did you meet your purpose? Becomes the first question you ask yourself. Was it fun? I mean, the purpose of your event is not to have fun, right? Because not just to have fun, you've got to have another purpose, but you still want them to have fun, right? Or people aren't going to come back. And so, was it enjoyable? What parts were, what parts weren't? Wow, people love the mariachi band. Okay, let's have music from now on. How do we, work that into our purpose, or whatever. They didn't have fun because the food was bad. Okay, we're gonna fix that. Did you meet your budget? Oh, budget creep on special events are so easy to do. And so up front, budget in all those expenses, including the postcards, and everything else. And where were you under budget? Where were you over budget? If you've done this for a while, or you have a previous event you can build your budget around, you should be able to get a decent budget. But that also helps if you're going to an outside venue to be able to say, that doesn't meet our budget. I know, okay, $1,000, either no, we can't come here, or we have budgeted X, can you meet it? And a lot of the venues will do that, give you a contribution. And if it's your place, doesn't mean the venue's free. You got to think about what costs are involved in that. It might cost more to cater, those kinds of things. Did it meet its goals? Some of that's the purpose. Did we raise money? Yes. We had a goal to raise 20,000. We only raised 15. Okay, why? Sometimes things happen. It rained on your golf event, right? Not much you can do about that, unless you have some kind of a creative way to keep people engaged. They already took the day off work, right? Why didn't it meet it? Sometimes life happens, but sometimes you go, we didn't have the right people in the room. How do we get the right people in the room next time? We didn't have good auction items. How do we get good auction items, right? Why didn't you meet it? And that way you can start working for next year to make next year better. And that's what I have. We've got about 15 minutes left. What questions, what tips, what do we want to talk about?
Do you have any sort of ballpark on what you think, if you spend this much, the bare minimum you should be making is this much? Like, if we spend $10,000, should we be making $50,000? Do you have a best practice on that?
If I remember it correctly, it should be 50 cents on the dollar.
Okay,
It should cost you 50 cents to raise $1.
okay,
So if you're spending 10,000, you should raise at least 20.
okay,
Now, that also includes your time,
right.
because that is an expense. And that's the one thing that a lot of organizations forget. It's that you wrote checks for 10,000, but you spent, 5 months exclusively on it. Your time is worth 20. Now you haven't raised.
Mhm.
That's exactly the reason we stopped our Mardi Gras event, was because while we we raised close to 50 cents per dollar, or we did that, but that wasn't calculating in any of my time, any of our executive director's time, because she helped out with the event too. I don't want to calculate how much that was, but I know it was way beyond what was worth it.
Yeah, yeah. And kudos to you for doing that math, for figuring that out. And that I would do that as part of the post-event follow-up. It's not just how much did we raise, how much did we spend, how much time did we spend? And before you say, yeah, but volunteers are doing all of it. First of all, that's time as well. Second of all, I've never seen a volunteer-driven event that doesn't put a ton of work on staff. So there is still time involved for you. And to be honest, there should be. Because you're the ones who know the organization, know how to message. You're the one who can be the heavy to go, this isn't on purpose. Great idea, mariachi band, but how does it help us raise money? I know it's your cousin's best friend's nephew, but how does that help us raise money, right? You get to play that role because you're the one who's responsible. Good question.
So another question I had was, like, if you're throwing an event, and so I'm gonna use an event, and don't burn me at the stake here for this, because you're gonna be like, what a missed opportunity. I wish I would have taken this before our big ribbon cutting event at Highland Springs, but it's an event like a ribbon cutting. A blanket invite is sent out to a lot of people. There's obviously no auction. How do I capture their contact information? They come to my event, they bring all their friends and everything, but how do it was a room full of 200 people. I'm pretty sure we only sent invites to 70 people. How do I capture all of that contact info when I don't have something that they're logging into, checking on, anything like that? Like, do I make them pause and write it down on a paper when they come in, or?
That's a hard one.
Yeah.
One trick, which wouldn't work for that trick, one approach, which wouldn't work with that one, is to do a raffle. And, put your name and contact information for a raffle for XYZ. In your case, those are people who are interested in First Tee, obviously. I would try to ask them to sign up for your newsletter.
Okay.
And do it in an easy way.
Yeah.
Drop your business card in here to sign up for a newsletter. You're gonna get business addresses, but you're at least gonna have contact information, right? Totally lost my train of thought.
No, that's a great one. I wouldn't even
Or
thought of that.
even just, sign up or have a couple iPads out where you can just really quickly
Yeah.
sign up and depending on what your system is, you might even be able to have it feed right into your database for you quickly. The other thing I would do, take lots of pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then this is another really good role for your board and for your volunteers. First of all, hopefully all your board came, or a lot of your board came. Right away, tell me who you saw and who you talked to. Just send me an email with a list. And then share the pictures. Who do you see? Who do you know? We just want a guest list of who was there. And that, I might forget that, oh yeah, I saw Decker across the room.
Right.
And then you're going, oh yeah, there's Decker. Oh yeah, there's, and getting a list out. Not perfect,
Yeah, but a way.
but for that kind of a really open event, that's a way to start capturing that information.
Okay.
Could you even do something as simple as like if they were seated at tables like a luncheon, or I don't know exactly what your thing was, but could you even just have like a piece of paper? I mean, I know that's, but not that sheetly done, but
Yep.
you know what I mean? Can you just pass the pad and
Yeah.
write your name down? I don't know.
Yeah, well, and I'm picturing a stand-up event where,
Yes, that's what it was.
you cut a ribbon, you have cookies and punch and people mingle and then they leave, right? Which isn't organized
Right,
enough to do
right.
that, but if you're seated, I think there's lots of ways to do that kind
Yeah.
of stuff.
Mhm.
Mhm. You could have, you know, a table captain whose job it is to capture the information of whomever's there. That's also
That's a good idea.
another reason to have seat assignments.
Mhm.
Because and we're getting well beyond what your event is, right? But then you have to register and know what table they're at, and you can at least get names and
Mhm.
those kinds of things.
This is probably more true of marketing, but you could also pay for some sort of geofencing for that particular event. It's a little bit more undercover, I suppose. But that way you'd be sure to pop up, and everyone who was there with their cell phone, you would then have access to.
Mhm.
That's a great idea.
Mhm.
Well, and you could do something fun with like, everybody, let's take a selfie and
Yeah.
tag such and such.
Yeah.
And you're not gonna get everybody who's gonna do that, but
Mhm.
that's a great idea. And yes, missed opportunity, but you're not gonna get 100%.
Right.
So, you know, think about, I'm kind of talking about, here's best case scenario.
Right.
If you can't best case scenario, what can you do to capture as many as you can?
Yeah.
Good question. Others? Wow, that's so quiet. All right, well, thank you again for being here. I'll put the recording up on the class website so you can refer back to it if you like. And I'll put the slides up there too. If you've got questions, comments, by all means, share them. And I'm happy to share them with everybody. If you're like me, it'll be as soon as you walk out, you go, oh, but yeah, thought about this one. So certainly send those on, and I look forward to seeing, you know, at least 5 really good events
Yeah.
in the community coming up. That,
Everyone invite Linda to your events.
You'll give out his feedback, right?
I was gonna say, be careful what you
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was so helpful, and I loved getting to meet all of you.
And use each other. You know, I'm not an event, right? So some of your questions, like, what platform do you use? You know, I've worked with enough organizations, I have some ideas, but people who do events have all those tips and tricks, so use each other too. Yep. Awesome, well, have a great day. Looks like it's dry so far. Stay dry and safe this weekend. Yet another
Thank you.
tough one.
Yet another one.
Uh-huh. All right, take care.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. This was really helpful, like